Okay. Hello, Bible scholars. This is David Higgins. Welcome to The Word is Spirit. The title of today's episode is The Apocalypse Revealed. God's plan to destroy the earth debunked. So now, as individuals, of course, we have a limited lifespan. Nobody can ignore the fact that we will, sooner or later, every single one of us pass from this world. So now the question of individual human mortality, not in question, but the question about whether or not collective humanity has a limited lifespan is actually a worthy question. Right now, the concept of impending global doom and destruction sort of looms large in the collective consciousness. The degraded state of the environment is weighing on everybody. The weather seems pretty erratic and destructive, whether or not it's just due to increased reporting. But in any case, it's got us all kind of on edge. And if you look to the near future with the environmental degradation, things seem like it could get pretty serious. At least the experts seem to be unanimous on that idea. Now, of course, we have global social, political, and economic turmoil, and that's kind of in sync with the way the world feels in general. There's a lot of anxiety in the world. And it's not really helped by most major religious traditions having the idea of impermanence and suffering as sort of foundational concepts. Buddhism is founded on the notion that everything is impermanent and that suffering is universal. Hinduism teaches that human society goes through cycles. There's 4 cycles, and it's generally believed that we are in the 4th, which is called Kali, which is characterized by moral degradation. And it concludes with the return of the god Vishnu on a white horse with a sword like a comet to destroy evil. Native American Hopi tribe believes in a world cataclysm, and it's called the Day of Purification. Vikings believe in mythology of an event called Ragnarok, and that included doom not just for the human race, but for all gods and goddesses as well, I believe. Aztecs believed the sun would be extinguished eventually. Zoroastrianism believed in a final battle between good and evil. Yeah, their apocalyptic scenario included a lot of volcanoes. But of course, we have Judaism and Islam both have a day of judgment, which is characterized by violence and devastation. The title of today's episode is The Apocalypse Revealed, because we're going to be addressing the book of Revelation and all of the end of the world scenarios that we find in Christianity. And my favorite theologian, Emanuel Swedenborg, wrote a book called The Apocalypse Revealed, and he goes through the book of Revelation verse by verse, phrase by phrase, to show the inner symbolic level of meaning in that book. I've said in other episodes that the Bible is a spiritual book and needs to be read symbolically. By spiritual, I mean that it addresses our spirit, which is our heart, and our mind. Those two things, the heart and the mind, form the human spirit. The heart is the seat of our will, which is our affections and desires and emotions. And the mind is the seat of our rationality, which includes our philosophies and the various ideas that we adopt as our own. I'll remind you that Jesus said quite emphatically that his kingdom was not of this world. I'll read to you Luke chapter 17, verses 20 and 21. It says, "The kingdom of God does not come with observation. The kingdom of God is within you." And John chapter 18, verse 36, this is when Jesus is standing before Pontius Pilate, the governor of Rome, the governor of Judea, in the name of Rome. And he's about to pass judgment on Jesus and condemn him to be crucified. And Jesus said that his kingdom is not of this world. If my kingdom were of this world, my servants would be fighting so that I would not be handed over to the Jews. But as it is, my kingdom is not of this realm. So the kingdom of God is our heart and our mind. God is divine love and divine wisdom. And the kingdom of God is established within us when our hearts and minds are receptive of God's love and wisdom. So now when we add it all up, then if we read the book of Revelation spiritually rather than literally, we recognize that the coming of the Lord and the establishment of his kingdom is a spiritual event, not a literal historical event. The end of the age, as it is called, occurs when we are reborn as spiritual beings and we leave the old externally focused state of mind behind and enter a new state characterized by genuine love for what is good and true and genuine care about our neighbors. So the apocalypse is the conflict that occurs between these two competing states of mind as we transition from the lower self to the newly reborn higher self. But even though there's a lot of very serious, dramatic, violent images associated with this transition, the apocalypse, we won't go through the details. I intend to go through the details in subsequent episodes so you can see the validity of Swedenborg's approach to these things. We'll go through all of the specific images that are in the book of Revelation. But one thing I want to point out is in Mark chapter 4, verse 26 to 28, the disciples are asking about the establishment of the kingdom of God. And this is Jesus' reply. He says, "The kingdom of God is like someone who casts seed into the earth. The seed sprouts and grows. He himself does not know how. The earth bears fruit of its own accord." And then again in Matthew 24:27, addressing the same issue, the coming of the kingdom, Jesus says, "As lightning comes from the east and flashes to the west, so also will be the coming of the Son of Man." What those two verses indicate is that the shift from being earthly minded to being spiritually minded is something that occurs sort of within our subconscious, and it happens, a sudden shift. It's like a flash and you see and your eyes are opened. That's what it means when it's talking about a flash of lightning from the east to the west, or it talking about seed sown into the earth, which is our lower mind. And we don't know how, but eventually the earth bears fruit of its own accord. So these verses, I believe, indicate that the shift from an external state to a spiritual state is something that happens without necessarily our conscious, deliberate, focused effort, that God makes it happen just naturally, like a seed growing out of the earth or like a flash of lightning. So I don't think that we necessarily have to expect tremendous conflict necessarily. For some people, I suppose it might be that way, but I think we don't have to strain or fret the notion and can just look for the peaceful leading of the Lord as we gradually learn to walk according to his ways. I also believe that all of the other, doomsday scenarios that are presented in so many cultures and faith traditions can also be applied spiritually rather than literally. And I think it's pretty important to understand, if you are reading the Bible, not to take it literally and shift your thinking away from the notion that it's part of God's plan that the physical world that we now occupy is on the chopping block. If we believe that this is God's plan and we look for those scenarios to transpire literally, it could become a self-fulfilling prophecy. So I want to read Revelations chapter 21, verse 1. It says, "I saw a new heaven and a new earth, for the first heaven and the first earth were passed away, and there was no more sea." Our consciousness has multiple levels. The term heaven refers to the inner, higher level, which is called spiritual, and it is the place of our loves and philosophies. And the term earth refers to our lower, externally oriented consciousness that deals with our mundane daily existence. And these two levels of our consciousness are actually recreated as we shift from the old selfish paradigm to the new reborn higher self that is truly a servant of what is good and true and has genuine love for and concern for the neighbor. In future episodes, I intend to address the specific imagery that we find in the book of Revelation to answer the questions of some serious Bible thumpers. But meanwhile, you can certainly investigate Swedenborg's books for yourself at swedenborg.com. If you're interested in understanding the book of Revelation spiritually, look for the title, The Apocalypse Revealed. Okay, well, I hope you got something useful out of that, and I hope we can all set aside the doomsday expectations for planet Earth, and that way we can work towards a brighter future for posterity rather than believing that God's going to wipe out this planet anyway. All right, until next time, have a wonderful day and go in peace. Hello, I'm back, and I decided that since you got to hear my donkey in the opening moments of this video, I figured I would include a little footage and take you outside and actually introduce you to the donkey. So we're going to go outside and you're going to get to meet Josie the donkey. There's Josie the donkey. Come on over and say hi, Joe. She's about 8 or 9 years old. I've had her since she was a baby. She's a good girl. She likes the carrot now and then. Yeah, pretty mellow. Josie, you're a good donkey. So now you know who was making all that racket when I opened the video. All right, so I guess I would also at this time remind you that I have a website, rationalmetaphysics.com, and I hope you'll visit over there. There's links to my books, a blog page, and donations tab. And also, if you would kindly like and subscribe to this video channel on YouTube, I would appreciate that as well, so I can get a little traction. All right, well, now you've met Joe the donkey. And you can take a quick look at the barn where I'm filming. All right, well, have a great day.